Welcome everyone. Welcome to a new seminar. Thanks for coming. We're very happy to have Daria today talk to us about product returns. Just two housekeeping things before I hand it over to Daria. Just as usual, please post your questions through the Q&A function in the Zoom, and we'll monitor that and ask questions at the right time. And then, as you know, kind of the talks last about an hour, and then if you're interested, you can stick around for another discussion at the end. Okay, so with that, Daria, please take over.
Thank you so much for joining us, me here, and inviting me to share this research with you guys. So let me, sorry, I forgot how to do this. Share and just the PowerPoint, right? Okay. Success? Yes, okay. Yes, so this is joint work with my co-authors Siham and Kihal at Frankfurt, John Hauser and Marat Ibragimov, professor and PhD student at MIT. Sorry about that. I opened the wrong slide deck, but so that's wrong. The title is right though. Okay, so what the phenomenon we're studying here is product returns, which is something that actually got very little attention in marketing. And there are a few sort of key papers on product returns in marketing up until sort of recently with the big transition to online retail. Because in online retail is where returns are really problematic. So this is an article from the Wall Street Journal a couple of years ago saying that, so Amazon actually at some point they saw so many returns, and returns are so costly. I'll talk about it in a second. So the cost of processing the return, of refurbishing the products is actually very costly to the firms. So Amazon started banning people, like canceling their Amazon accounts if they were returning too much. Okay. So basically the point of this is that even the biggest company, on earth doesn't really know what to do with this problem, because clearly, just banning people from shopping doesn't seem like a great solution. And people, of course, imagine you lose your Amazon account, you lose access to all your videos on Amazon. So people got very upset, and they said, well, if I had known I was going to get banned if I returned too much, maybe I wouldn't have shopped the way I did, right? I wouldn't have shopped so much in the apparel and shoes categories, which are the ones that see these high return rates, and so on. So anyway, so this doesn't seem like a great solution. And I'll show you the cost breakdown in a minute. It's actually not in this paper, it's from another paper. But we're going to look at data from the clothing and accessories category, because, so this is data from 2016 from a survey, So we see here that that's the category that suffers the most from returns. Okay, so it's the one where most people report having returns. Okay, so the cost, just a little bit jumping ahead. In our data, the return rate, the average return rate is 53%. Okay, so I don't know to what extent that number is. So when I first heard this number, I thought that sounded like an incredibly high number. And then actually it turns out, so I recently got some data from a Russian apparel retailer, and it's even higher than that. Okay. Because here return policies are even more lenient and the return process is even easier. So you just see people sort of shopping, sort of trying things out and returning them even more. So anyway, in our data,
excuse me for the interruption. I think there's a little bit of echo. I think some of us have a hard time hearing you. And maybe
let me try to turn the microphone on and off. Is it help or no?
We'll see.
Yeah, or maybe
1, 2, 3.
Close enough to the microphone, because we were getting it was clear sections and then not so clear sections for whatever.
Maybe when you're closer like this, it works better.
Like this.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try. How is it now? Return rates high. Can you hear it better? Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Video at some point, if you think that's a bandwidth issue, maybe.
Then I'll try to move, but I always do Zoom calls from here. So unless it's feeling particularly bad, let's hope it's the mic and not the connection. Okay, so the breakdown, and so this is a European retailer. Okay, it's a German women's apparel line, and it's a vertically integrated. So it's a, think of it like a Gap. Okay, so it's a manufacturer and retailer. And so the costs are as follows. When a product is returned, the company pays the return shipping. Okay, and in the EU by law, they have to offer free return shipping and handling. So in the US, that's not the case by law, but what we see is most retailers offering it anyway for, in order to compete. So in the EU, it's by law. So the cost is €2.50 just for the return shipping. And then what happens is actually that there's a third party which manages the return. Okay, so there's a separate warehouse where the box arrives. Somebody physically has to open the box, look at the item, make sure it's not worn, make sure it can be returned, find your order, find your credit card information, issue the return back to your credit card. Okay, so that processing cost is another €2.50. Okay, so we're already at €5 flat fee just for nothing, just for the processing, shipping and processing. And then there is an average for this company, and that's about the industry average, about 13% of the price of the item is the refurbishing fee. So some of the items do come a little bit damaged. Even if they're not damaged, the packaging is torn. It would have to be steamed, repackaged. Sometimes there's, like a nice sheet of paper in there that was taken out. So before it can be shipped as a brand new item to the next customer. Right? So overall, so it's €5 flat fee plus 13% of the original price. So if you look at it, if you think about this, and in the apparel industry, unlike something like groceries, margins are pretty healthy. Okay, so you have like, something like 60–70% margins is common. But if you think about selling like a €30 sweater, for which the manufacturing cost is €10, the return cost at the average rate of 53%, the cost of the return is €9.31. So this item becomes actually much more profitable, marginally much more profitable to sell it in the online channel. What happens with the offline? So in our data, the offline return rate is only 2%. Okay, so really marginal. And the costs are not that high because in the offline channel, people bring it back. If the item is damaged, you can sort of reject it, right? Because, and the salesperson who accepts the return is working there anyway, so they don't have to be paid extra in order to process it. So with the offline channel, it's probably just a little bit under 20%. So, it feels like the online channel is a lot more cost efficient, but once you take this huge discrepancy in return rates into account, it's actually a lot less profitable at the margin. Okay, and another thing to think about is just that it's very sensitive to the return rate. The profitability of a given item is very sensitive. So to bring us down to almost no profits, we just have to bump the return rate up by 15%. And we are at a break-even point, where if it's even higher than that, we'd want to probably exclude the item from the assortment altogether. And if we decrease the return rate by 13%, we're almost doubling our profitability. So my point is that the profitability is very sensitive. Okay. So this is just a histogram of product return rates. So these are sort of 4,500 items in our data, okay, for which we observe the return rate. So what we're going to be doing is trying to see if we can identify some patterns. What are these items that are getting returned so much? Yeah, so the maximum here is 94. So there was actually an item in the store that got returned 94% of the times that it was purchased.
So Daria, I have a quick question. So I'm curious, how many percent of people order online and return offline?
Almost none. So in this data set, almost none, yes. And I think it might have something to do with the policy. Yes, so most of them go back through this third-party company.
Okay.
That's a good question. I should check for sure. Thanks. Okay, So what we're looking for is there's something systematic about these items that are getting returned a lot. Okay, so why would you need an estimate of the product return rate? And what we're going to try to do is forecast the product return rate pre-launch, okay? So where would you need to know? Well, it enters into the profitability, right, as we saw. And you need profitability if you want to do assortment optimization. So determine what should the product line be. Reverse logistics decisions. So this is sort of the decision, like whether to outsource your return processing or do it in-house. Things like the return policy itself, how lenient you want it to be. One that's maybe a little bit less direct is the rank ordering on the website. So Raluca is gonna probably yell at me because I'm gonna explain this incorrectly, but so at least one heuristic way you can think of about how to rank order products on a website, and I think you know, many of the less sophisticated online retailers do this, is rank order by expected profitability. Okay, and that expected profitability so that's basically your margin times the probability that it'll be purchased. Okay, so I've sort of seen this heuristic used, and this can be personalized or not. So the probability that you'll purchase could be computed for this individual customer or could be on average. Okay, but this is actually a pretty good heuristic. With returns, of course, it's a very different expectation, right? So it's the margin times the probability they'll buy times the probability they'll keep it minus the cost of the return times the probability of the return, right? So this is sort of just one of the decisions where you would need this thing, right? So you need a prediction of this thing. Okay. Okay. So what we're going to do is try to aid online retail management by forecasting these return rates for a given product. Okay. And we're going to use the product characteristics, including the product image, to get a good prediction. Okay. So we are, I'll do a quick literature review. So leveraging unstructured data is of course getting more and more common in marketing science and practice. So I want to talk more about the product returns literature. So the focus here has been on mainly two things. One is, should we have a return policy or not, right? And sort of the dollar value, like how much utility does it add for consumers to have a return policy in place? And how lenient the return policy should be. Okay, so that's one area. And another is implications for equilibrium prices. Okay, so if I had a return policy, then sort of an equilibrium, how do prices change? So we are quite different than anything that's been done there, because we're going to be doing this at the product level. And we're going to try to predict the return rates before the product is launched based on those product characteristics. By the way, the reason for wanting to do this pre-launch is because in apparel, everything is seasonal, right? So in this case, the return policy is 14 days. Very often it's 31 days. So you don't really observe. So if you wanted to launch the product, like we do with demand, right? Like we sort of launch it in a test market, see how well it's doing, and based on that, we do our demand forecast. If we wanted to do this here, we'd have to wait out the 31 days until we observe the return rate, and plus some for the product to pick up. And by that point, the season is almost over, and it's time to sort of, put everything on clearance and bring in the next season. So this is something that takes such a long lag until we can observe it accurately that the pre-launch decision is very valuable. Okay, and it's a little bit related to this literature on online and offline retail and sort of the interaction between the two channels. How do we want to optimize assortments across the two channels? Usually what happens is that firms have the full assortment online and a subset of the assortment offline. Okay, because offline there are space constraints and it's just generally costlier to stock something. So you often see like online exclusives, but I've never seen offline exclusives. So I've never seen an item which is sold offline but not available on the website, right? But kind of the implications here is that you might want to offer some of these items offline, no problem, but keep them out of the online channel because they're actually generating, generating losses. Okay, cool. So, okay, so actually starting with that, and this is kind of how we started. I have some papers a few years ago where we show that people, like in a conjoint setting, that people actually weight attributes very differently. The exact same people, the exact same products, weight attributes very differently depending on whether they're looking at the item online or offline. Okay, so, and sometimes the discrepancy is like triple. So they put triple the weight on an attribute online than they did offline, or vice versa. So, and then we were thinking, so people have this online utility function, which they use to make the purchase, and then they have an offline utility function, which they use to make the keep or return decision. Then the bigger that discrepancy, the more likely that is to lead to returns. So, and now I have 3 papers into which I tried to add that brilliant idea into discussion at the end, and every time reviewers have said take that out because you don't have evidence. So we went and got empirical data on product returns, and so here it is. Okay, so why do people return online so much? Because the way the perceived utility of an item online is higher, right, than that item's utility offline. So that's kind of the underlying model, if you want. And so online, actually, it's a two-stage decision. So you make the purchase decision using this online utility function. And as you'll see in close, I'll show you a little bit, just like really model for evidence. Online, people like to click on things that are bright red and pink and draw your attention more. But while what people keep and what they buy offline is more like black, navy, blue, and gray. Right? That's what you actually pull out of your closet to wear on Monday morning. But online, what draws your attention are sort of colorful, if you want, more ambitious items. So they get clicked more, they get purchased more, and then they get returned. So here it's kind of a 2-step decision. And here it's a 1-step decision where it's sort of the right objective function. Okay, so I'll skip that. So that's basically it, right? So here we have sort of different criteria that people use to evaluate products in the 2 channels. Okay. I'll skip through it. So before we go to the products, I just want to show you on a very clear example, which is breaking them down by category. So these are the categories in our data, right? So these are the types of clothing. And if you see that the highest return rate, so if you look at, this is dresses, 72%. So again, like if that number doesn't shock you, I don't know. I think we're living in different universes. So in the whole category, the average return rate is 72%. Makes you wonder, sort of, maybe just don't sell dresses online at all. So there's no way some of these things are profitable. Okay, so that's the return rate by category, right? So now let's look at the online and offline purchases. So we see online, dresses are the most popular category. So that's what people want to shop for online. And offline, it's only the 5th most popular category. Yeah. So I guess sort of one explanation for this is, and again, I don't have evidence, but I think that's a mechanism that makes sense that I would love to test at some point, is that people's goal when they go online to the online shop is a little bit different. It's more about entertainment. So you see people shopping online from when they're procrastinating at work, when they're sitting in a boring seminar or a boring meeting, or when they're waiting for the bus, they go and they start shopping online. So the goal is shopping, but also kind of entertainment, right? And the things that are going to entertain you are these whatever more red, flowery, bright colored items. Whereas when people are going to the offline shop, they're more likely looking for something in particular. Cool. Okay, so
Daria, a quick question. So for the 4,000 to 5,000 items, in this data, do we have a correlation or scatter plot between the sales discrepancy versus the return rate?
I have a regression. Maybe I don't have it here. So if you, I think I took it out. I took it out. But if you just regress online, I'll check later if I have it in a backup slide. But if you regress online sales on offline sales and returns, is that what I want? Yes. So yeah, I guess offline sales on online sales and returns, the return coefficient is positive and very significant. I think that's what you mean, right? So so at the item level. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yes. So that's again, it's not a mechanism per se, but it does kind of inform us a little bit about what's driving it, right?
Yeah, and I was just wondering, like, does the direction of in the discrepancy matter? Like, because I'm thinking, like, why do people buy some certain items online versus offline? Is it because these items are actually easier for them to make decision without a touch and feel? Right. They have to go to offline. So I was just like not sure about like whether if you see more sales online, the return rate is necessarily higher. But then if you have like this empirical evidence or a correlation in your data, I think that's great.
Right. So I think by the way, I think all of those things are going on. And you know, one way to think about return rates, and I think Duncan and Eric Anderson, and I'm a terrible person, but I can't remember the third author, have a paper on returns and management science that where sort of the model is there's some component of the utility which you can observe online, right? And then another component of the utility like the touch and feel and the fit and the smell, if it's you know the beauty category or something, which you only observe offline, right? So that second component gets revealed, and then based on that you make a decision. But we can predict it based on only information the person had access to online, right? So we're just going to use the picture and the product description, and we can predict the return rate pretty accurately. So that suggests, doesn't prove that there is a bit, it's more like a bias, that there are certain characteristics which draw you more online than offline, rather than just sort of this uncertainty. Okay, so.
Can I quickly ask about one thing? I'm not sure if that's the direction you go in, so please ignore if this is not relevant. But you mentioned several times that this high return rates of, let's say, dress category online is not profitable. But I wonder, wouldn't just retailer include it in their price and just set the prices accordingly to account for high return rates? And like, given that especially items which are sold online, might the quality to price ratio will be very different, and just price reflects this.
Right. So this particular retailer wasn't even aware of the problem. So in equilibrium, I agree with you that and as I mentioned, there's sort of the little literature that there is on return rates is focusing on that and how to integrate that into prices. I'm gonna say that I'm pretty sure this retailer didn't, and from what I hear, you know, about the apparel industry in general, I don't think so. So I think that the prices were optimized for the offline channel. I think most of the apparel industry has been optimized for the offline channel. Same with product assortments. So I have a friend who is a buyer for Macy's, okay? And what she does is, you know, she flies around to different designers and she comes up with a collection. And then they have a whole, when she presents the collection, it's sort of what goes on this wall with the bright lighting and what goes over here by the cash register and what goes by the fitting room and what goes on the mannequin and what goes on the shelves below the mannequin. Okay, so it's this very, very complicated process. People have great intuition about how customers shop. And then, so this is Macy's. Saks Fifth Avenue works the same way. So there's and this company as well. The online guys, they sit in a different city, not just in a different office, in a different city. And then what they did, and they don't know anything about fashion, customers, you know, whatever. What they did is they basically take that and just dump it into the online channel. And they're computer engineers, you know, their job is to make sure all the pages load and you know, the images are lined up and so on. So from, I mean, this one for sure I can say is not that sophisticated. They took whatever pricing was there in the offline channel and adopted it for the online channel. But as they get more sophisticated, I agree that should happen. And I'm not sure what the equilibrium will be, because also the higher the price, the higher the return rate. So I think what we should see is just some of these items are going to not be sold in the online channel. And that's kind of the proposed solution here, that we're going to try to simulate, like whether based on our model, whether the predictive accuracy of the model we can get is good enough, you know, sort of the error is small enough that we can reliably say this item should be excluded from the assortment.
But so to quickly confirm, so in this data, prices offline and online are the same, and
the prices in the online and offline are the same. That's company policy.
Got it. Thank you.
But they were not optimized to incorporate the online return rate. Yeah.
So Daria, in terms of managerial decisions, you might also want to think about web rooming and showrooming. I think they're not independent channels. So even though an item may actually not be profitable online, actually it might drive sales offline and vice versa. That may be something to think about in the...
I agree. Unfortunately here, so this company didn't have a loyalty program, so we don't see individual consumers actually. So we just see sort of item level transactions. But
yeah, I had a very similar question. So I was thinking, so you don't have the customer ID, so you don't know like if the same individual shopped online, offline. That would be interesting.
Yes, or they went to the offline store, tried it on.
Exactly. Yeah. Because I'm wondering if like the difference you observe offline and online, it could be caused by two things, right? It could be like caused by like what you're saying is online, offline, people are attracted to like different type of items. It could be also the online customers and offline customers. They're just
different people.
Different people, exactly. Yeah. They are like, right. It could be a combination of both.
I'm sure the second thing for sure has to be is there.
Yeah.
So that's why sort of, again, in this conjoint paper, we had a very clear measurement because we had the same people do online and offline and then reverse the order, and we still see it. Whereas here, of course, you don't control it. So, and it's even the same customer, but on a different occasion would exhibit different behavior. Yeah. I agree with you. Yes.
No, I just a couple of questions from the audience. So one of them is asking kind of, do you observe the reason for why people are returning a product? And so you could tell like they just return it because it doesn't fit or because they didn't order the right size or something like that.
So I think we don't. I think many companies do collect this data. Honestly, I'm not sure how reliable it is. I think, people sort of check it's the wrong size. Maybe some people don't. I know a company in New York, actually, they were our guest speaker. So they collect very detailed information, and they have sort of like, and people, it's amazing how much people are willing to write if you ask them sort of politely and tell them this is going to be important feedback. We haven't done anything with it here, but I think that definitely would be interesting. If the company has sort of good enough customer engagement that they're providing a lot of details, that would be nice. Yeah.
And it sounds like you can't implicitly infer that by their purchase behavior because you don't see whether they then buy the same product in a different size right after this.
We don't. So again, I have a lot of sort of qualitative evidence. So it took us a long time to get this data because the ideal data set would have had, as you'll see here, so we wanted a lot of transactions and a lot of fashion items in order for us to actually be able to train these neural networks, right? You need like a few thousand images. And we needed a vertically integrated retailer because, for example, like I don't think Nike knows even how many of their products are sold online, offline, returned online, offline, right? So you really need something like a Gap or an H&M, which sort of has its own stores, and that would be willing to give us both the online and the offline data. So in the process,
can you clarify why just a retailer who's not a manufacturer wouldn't be interested in the same problem?
A retailer who is not a manufacturer, I guess that would depend on whether, on who bears the costs, right? Like Macy's, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how their costs are structured. So the information I have are about the vertically integrated ones. And I mean, ideally, it's nice if we can sort of see like in all, this is literally all the transactions of this item, right? So something like Nike, Macy's, I think it's a little bit harder because you also can't tell, again, if they sort of purchased from somewhere else or tried it on somewhere else. But I agree, they should be interested. And if they are bearing the cost, they should not want to keep the item. Okay, so anyway, so what was I saying? That the qualitative evidence, so this company that I mentioned was our guest speaker, and she was the first one who sort of opened my eyes to this problem, that she said when people are shopping online, they're just drawn, so this company makes women's professional apparel, okay, so like suits, dresses, blazers for work. And she said, online, everybody is drawn to these flowery dresses, interesting cuts, interesting prints. And so that you make an appointment in the showroom, you click a few items that you for sure want to see, and then they sort of help you bring out other items. Everybody is very biased in this direction of sort of interesting. And then what they walk out here with is the black dress, okay? And she said, online, it's very hard to sell a black dress. It just doesn't, right? Just doesn't draw your attention. And then, but on your, so she said, you know, if I put my best sellers would just be black dress, blue dress, black dress, blue dress, gray dress. But what you have to have on your website, and you have to sort of, in your email campaigns, in all your advertising, is the more interesting stuff that draws people in. And then they, you know, you try to sell them black. Okay? So again, the intuition that these people have is that there is a bias. Okay. Okay. So the data, whoops. The data are, we've got transactions over 2 years. Actually had a little bit more and ended up cutting them because some of the images didn't get stored. We've got for each product, a product image. All the images are like this. So they're against the white background. None of them are on a model. It's just the item against the white background, okay? So we are not going to focus at all on what kind of photography is going to drive this up or down, which I think is a fascinating issue, by the way. So when they take a picture on a model who's making the item look really good, or better yet, they put the model on some beach in the Mediterranean, which makes the item look even better, right? So what is that doing? That's increasing the online utility, right? And the offline utility stays the same. And the more you increase that discrepancy, the more you increase the return rate. So, you know, because people are buying the Mediterranean beach, but all they get is a stupid black t-shirt, right? So.
Daria, though you say you abstract from the photographic elements of it, but I mean, definitely if there were a model or background, that would make the problem more severe. But I mean, even if you look just at these three, right, there is much more 3D here happening to the non-black one, for example, versus the black one, right? In terms of, so how much is it the more of the photographic elements of still what we see even within this limited variation versus actually the product itself? Are you distinguishing between the?
Oh, we're not. And I think so. I think in order to really test that, you would need to vary, like keep all else the same, and you would sort of need to randomize the photography, right? So have one of them taken like a better quality picture or picture on a model. But that's actually the problem with black items. If you know like about photography a little bit, black items are difficult to photograph because it's hard to pick out any of the interesting details, which you can see with your eyes, but you can, so that's kind of an inherent issue.
So some of the effect could be simply the differences in difficulty to take pictures of certain products. Should we think about it that way?
I don't know. So the fact that some item isn't, I don't think we could tease it apart whether it's this characteristic that people like or don't like online, or this characteristics which does or doesn't come through in the photograph. I don't know. I think that's a little bit too subtle to pick up unless you would really like play with the lighting or something like that, right? I mean, I think in any case, it's an inherent property of the product.
Sure.
So at least I don't see a way to test it, but I do think it's a fascinating area. Whether you know, so because you know, we need to know what are we going to do about this, and if there's something we can do about it, like with the photography, that's actually the easiest solution if there's something. Yeah. So anyway, but in this case, actually, I think what's good for us is that they were all photographed in the same studio, and they just go, you know, put it on the white table, take a photo, next. So that aspect of it is constant for all the items, and all of these were photographed by the same one. Yeah. So that's why we're abstracting away from it, because thankfully for us, they were done the same way. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for that. So. Okay, so you know, so if you think about returns, again, returns are not all that different for than demand. I mean, we have some item characteristics. I mean, that's what we do. We have some item characteristics, and we want to know which of, you know, whether this shampoo or this car or these tires will do well in the store, right? But you know, we see very few papers on fashion. And part of that is because how do we usually predict demand? We break the product down into attributes, and we get some estimates of those attributes, either through a conjoint type study or through historical demand data. With fashion, characteristics are hard to quantify, so we're going to try to use images. And I in particular am very excited about the possibility of using images to sort of enhance demand models as well as returns, because so when you don't use the image, basically any information contained in the image is left in the error term, right? And if we can somehow learn to quantify some of what's in the image, that should improve demand models. Okay, so before I go to sort of the CNN, which is a little bit unsatisfying because it's so hard to interpret, I'm going to show you a really stupid model. Okay, this is a really stupid model because it's not causal, it's not predictive, it's not anything, it's completely correlational. So what we did was extract the color histograms and group the colors into color groups. Okay, so all the pinks together, all the purples together, all the reds together, and so on. Yeah? And then here we're going to regress offline sales on online sales plus the colors. Okay. And so what do we see? So this is going to be sort of the discrepancy. So what is doing better offline than it is online? Okay. Answer, this is at the item level. Okay. So what's doing better offline than it is online? The blues and the blacks. Okay. So these are the ones who are statistically significant. Okay. So again, that's just sort of to convince you that there is some information in the image which we should be doing. Okay, this is for the discrepancy. Sorry.
Daria, so the prices are different online and offline, right? So you
prices are the same.
Oh, they're the same.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You mean the price on? Yes. It's just the price. Thank you. And if we regress the return rate, it's not quite so clean, but again, so it's all the colors plus the category plus the price. And here we see that pinks get returned more than other colors. Okay. So again, this model is not particularly good for prediction because we just grouped a bunch of things together, which shouldn't really be grouped together. Like there's cyans and blues here, and in green you have like neon green and forest green. So not great for prediction, but at least we see that there's something here. So I'll show you then a bunch of models. You won't be surprised to see that the CNN approach is going to be the best for prediction. Okay, so what we're going to do is extract features using color histograms, Gabor features, and the last layer of a pre-trained neural network. Okay, so we're not training it ourselves, we're just extracting the features. Putting that through a bunch of classifiers where the XGBoost will do the best. Okay. Okay. So let me first show you. How do I move you guys? I can't see my screen because you're all blocking it. Okay. Okay. So first, the benchmark models. So the baseline model is based on no image, just the product category. right? So dresses, pants, sweaters, whatever. Seasonality, so that's the month in which it's launched. Okay, so just in case, you know, winter coats are returned more or less than, I don't know, summer shorts. So category, seasonality, and price. So that's the baseline model, which doesn't use anything. Here we added a feature which is color labels. These are the color labels provided by the retailer. Okay, so as part of the product description, it has colors. Okay? So we added that. What did I want to say? I forgot. Oh, quick note about kind of these types of models. So in econometrics, usually when we want to decide whether or not a particular factor is important, we test for statistical significance, right? In machine learning, or you know, when it's something like an image, we can't test whether it's important. So what we do is we train the best possible model, the best possible predictive model you can, based on all the information you have, okay? And you see how good is that? And then you take away certain information and you see, is the model doing more poorly, okay? And if it is, then that was important information. So that's kind of, that's what I'm gonna do, sort of train a model with and without certain features and see which of these are important. And basically, you know, the interpretation is if I can predict just as well without this information, then this information is sort of is irrelevant given the other information. Okay, so just a little bit of intuition about these baseline models, the benchmark model. So from now on, the benchmark model is going to be this. Okay, so this is the key benchmark. It includes category information, price, seasonality, and the color labels as provided by the retailer. So these are 3 items. You can see John and Marat were having a really good time with this paper. So these were John's choices, by the way. So we have one top here. The benchmark prediction actually predicts very well. So the actual return rate for this t-shirt is 50%. And the benchmark model gets it pretty accurately. The striped top, the benchmark overshoots. So it predicts 47%, the real thing is 30%. And on this, I think it's a dress or a top, probably a dress, it's undershooting. So the return rate for this thing is 82%. And the model predicts it high, but not as high, okay? So this is where you can sort of get some intuition where there's definitely other information in this image here beyond just the fact that this dress is pink, right? I mean, it's got all this other stuff. It's asymmetrical, it's got glitter, it's, yeah. So we'll see if the deep learning model.
One question. I know you're thinking about this at the individual product level and predicting return rates at each individual product. So, but one question from the audience, and I was wondering about this too, is can we use maybe in the benchmark model, for example, the fact that someone buys more than one product in an order?
That's a very good question. Yes, thank you. That's a really good question. We did a whole bunch of things, and again, in the review process, a whole bunch of these great ideas came up actually. Oh, what about on weekends? People return more on weekends. People return more in the evening. Some people just return more, right? Like there's the customer's base rate. Some people just have a lower castle cost or whatever. But we're trying to predict this before launch. So that's why we're sort of stuck only using the information that's the product description. Because so I could make a prediction that you right now, you just created this basket, you're going to be returning. But there's really not much I can do at that point except, you know, accidentally make the website crash or something and prevent you from buying. But that's why we're interested at the product line design stage, right? So you're the manager and your designers just created, you know, designed all these shirts and dresses, and you have to decide what is going to go into the collection. Yeah. So pre-launch, so that's why we're not using any of the individual level transaction information. Yeah.
Makes sense, thanks.
Okay, so here are the other models. So this is our benchmark from before, which is going to be sort of that's the base rate. So we're reporting R squared, but out of sample R squared, right? So it's the mean square error normalized by the variance. So in addition to these features, if you add just the RGB histograms, you do a little bit better, RGB and Gabor. much better. And what we see is once you take the deep learning features, that's as well as we're going to do. So if we just add color histograms and Gabor to the deep learned features, we don't do better, right? So the deep learned features are capturing all the information. So there's no additional information provided by this. Okay, so a question that you always kind of wonder at this stage is, well, like, is that good, right? Like, is that a 10% improvement in predictive accuracy? I don't know, gonna make more money. So here is, coming up in a second. So what we're gonna do is try to simulate try to come up with a policy, which is gonna be based on the model's error, right? So for example, if your model has a very high uncertainty in the prediction for a particular item, and the model is saying, remove this from the assortment because its expected profitability is just under 0, you may not want to rely on that. But if the model is super certain, and it's saying the profitability is going to be way below 0, then you remove it. Okay, so we're going to derive a policy and show that this actually reaches a reasonable amount of improvement. Okay, just a few robustness tests because there are a lot of good ways of doing this. We removed products, I forgot to mention this earlier, so we removed any products that were purchased fewer than 20 times, and that is robust to that threshold. Alternative features like other color codings. We tried to do a dimensionality reduction on the deep learned features, so on the last layer of the network, run that through a PCA. It performs about equally well, actually, it doesn't do worse. Other CNNs and other regression models that the feature is going to. Okay, these are XGBoost. Okay, so at least, okay, we'll see that from the benchmark on these 3 items, it moved it in the direction that we wanted. This one increases, this one decreases. So hopefully those deep learned features are picking up some of these additional features, and those features are related to the DD, to the return rate. Okay. Something we tried, and again, you think about this a lot, and you sort of get these intuitions. Is it because this dress is asymmetrical? Is it because it has glitter? Is it because it's striped? Is it because it has flowers? So we had human judges code everything in the tops and dresses categories for these features here. So symmetry, whether it's symmetrical or not, pattern, solid, floral, striped, geometric, or abstract, and then additional details like, does it have text? Does it have metallic or sequin, graphic, or lace? Okay. So interestingly, a lot of these are correlated with the return rate. You can see here. Actually, for me, a little bit in the opposite way that I would expect. It's negatively correlated with the return rate. So sort of the solid things seem to get returning more. And I think that's kind of idiosyncratic to this company, because this is like the quality is not that great for this manufacturer. So when people just buy a plain thing, it really doesn't look that good. Okay, and whoops, this shouldn't have been here. I'm gonna move it. I don't know why it's there. So what we see is that it's actually so if you regress the return rate on these and the online-offline discrepancy on these, the pattern is somewhat similar. You see, so these things are impacting it negatively. No, sorry, not impacting it. Are correlated negatively correlated with the 2. Okay, so again, suggesting that it's the 2 phenomena are related, the online-offline discrepancy in their return rate. Okay. The human-coded features don't seem to add to the, I don't know why I can't, why these things showed up on my slides, but I'll just tell you, and you should believe me. So the human-coded features also don't add much to the deep learning features, right? So, okay, perfect. Any questions on?
A quick question about just the loss function here. If the goal is eventually to, say, remove things from the inventory, and you're going to propose a policy here, it seems like it might be good to somehow target the loss function of this predictive model towards that goal. Because as is, it seems like this predictive model cares equally about getting the return rate of, 5% right versus the return rate of 95%. And only some of those are relevant to
the higher ones, right? It's the higher ones that are relevant because most of these items are profitable, right? We're looking for sort of the few which are not. I like that. No, so we're not. We are weighting them equally. And you're right. That would be nice. So try to make sure that you get just like in a recommendation system, you want to get the good ones right. Here, you want to get the bad ones right. I like that. Thank you.
Can I ask quickly related to this? And this is more kind of a big picture. What is the end objective of this? What is the goal of this?
So the formal objective function is to see whether we can predict this. Because again, it's not obvious, right? Like many people think that the reason things get returned is because of the touch and feel. So it's these additional features that you don't really observe on the picture, right? It's something that gets revealed to like the fabric smells bad or feel bad. So that's encouraging that we can predict. And let me show you quickly how to incorporate it into the assortment decision. So again, in terms of levers, and sort of you guys brought up a few here in today's talk. So can we photograph them differently? Can we price them differently? Is there something we can do? So the simplest thing you can do is just remove them altogether from the online shop. So that's what we're going to try to do now. So in our data, about 24% of the products are unprofitable. Okay. Oh, by the way, so we have the cost data, which we don't use because the company gave them to us accidentally. We asked for the cost data and they said, no, are you crazy? We'll never give you the cost data. And then they sent over the files with the cost information there. But even just sort of using the average information on the average margins, so 24% of the products are unprofitable in the online channel, which is a lot, I think. I mean, to me, that seems like a high number.
You said earlier that the manager from the company said that actually they have to put them on the website to attract people to the website and to get traffic. So it's almost like the loss leaders.
Right.
And so in that case, I wonder whether...
Right. Yes. And so that's a different, this company is much less, is less exciting than that. I agree that, so that's not their strategy. So they, there are other things you can do. Like for example, you have it in the mailing, but then you can still rank order them to push people towards the more profitable items, right? So Warby Parker told me something similar, that in all their email campaigns, they have these designer sort of really interesting collection frames. But then ultimately what they sell are their more classic frames. So sort of, it seems like everybody's kind of realizing this over and over, right? Or again, the intuition is there. The data so far isn't.
Daria, so can I quickly follow up on the question? Because it looks like from this, what you're saying is that we can use this to have a kind of large policy intervention where we'll remove half of the assortment. And in 20%. This case, aren't we worried that people will just update like how return is happening, their beliefs about the quality or the thing was? Or alternatively, you could use these results to understand what is the mechanism behind what's going on.
So for now, we're not doing either of those. No, thank you. These are very important points. So what I want to use this for is to tell whether the 10% improvement in accuracy, sorry, where am I? The 10% improvement in accuracy, whether that is something significant. Yeah. So I'm not proposing that the company go and do it. I'm just trying to understand whether the additional predictive accuracy due to that. So I think assortment optimization is a really complicated problem, right? Which does need to take into account loss leaders and bringing things into the channel and interaction and all sorts of things. It's a really complicated problem. And assortment optimization across two channels is an even more complicated problem, which is way beyond scope. So what we want to see is whether, what I want to use this simulation for is to see whether the 10% improvement is something significant, right? Is an actual improvement. So that's all it is.
Daria, if I can interrupt, if you can go back to the slides where you compare different models. I think it's definitely a good starting point for the managers to have a better prediction in the product return. On that point, do we have do we know how the improvement in the prediction accuracy changes across different categories or change across different labels? What is the relationship between the improvement with, say, sales volume? And I wonder whether it's for the low volume sales items that deep learning will help the most.
Why do you think that I don't have, I feel like we calculated this, but I can't remember for the life of me what it was. Why do you think that it's going to be for the low items? Because I feel for the low items, it's just very noisy, right? So I feel like no model would be able to predict those well because it's just noise.
So I'm not sure whether this is true, but what I'm thinking is that if I'm a manager and I'm looking at course information like categories, label, or style, then I need some data points in the past for me to get a sense of what's the accuracy, what's the prediction in the return rate and how is that changes across different types of products. But then I'm thinking, well, deep learning, you're able to capture more underlying structure, like composition was something that's like go beyond their style that might not be obvious to see at the course level. That's what I'm saying. So
you think basically that it's not that we're predicting those items well, it's just that for the low volume items, this model is going to be really bad.
That's my guess.
Yes, yes. It could be. I will check. We'll check where the improvement is coming from. I don't know, because again, my intuition is just that the low volume ones are kind of hopeless.
I think my intuition is for dresses, your model probably would do really well. But for like more basic items, like it's just regular t-shirt or blazer, maybe it's, I think, right? I think it's more about like, I think where you can move the needle is probably where the return rate is higher. I think then your model should help.
That would be the hope. That would be the hope. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's definitely something to look at. And if that's the case, that's nice. Right. It's something that will on the high return items.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. So, okay. So I can show you this or not. We only have a few minutes. So, but the point is, if you think of, I'm not going to go through the policy derivation, but basically it depends on how confident you are in your model's prediction about the return rate and thus the profitability. So if you sort of derive this threshold for what should the model predict, how low should the model predict the profitability to be, given the model's error rate, in order to exclude the assortment. So you can see the derivation if you're interested in the paper. It's fairly straightforward. So what does the model, and again, this is really just a way of comparing models. So compared to launching everything, if you use our model, the model tries to exclude 8.48%, 8% of the items. So it would say, it identifies 8% that it's confident enough that it says they should be removed. Okay, so the threshold is less than 0. The threshold is not 0 profitability. Yeah? If you had perfect intuition, I don't know why it's 26 and I had 24 before, but ideally you should not launch 26% of the items, okay? And the improvement in profitability over what they did, which is launch everything, here is 21% and here is 8%. So it's 40, this prediction is getting us 40% of the way there, okay? And again, the point of this is not to say this is the optimal assortment. That's a much more difficult problem, but to show that this improvement in profitability is significant. So it is finding those unprofitable items well, which sort of gets at some of these, where it's moving the needle. Yeah. Okay, that's basically all I have. So let me, instead of summarizing, maybe we can take a few questions.
Sure. Maybe this is a good time to kind of close the formal part of the talk and like kind of open it up to everyone to ask more questions. I'll start with the 2 of the questions that are in the chat here, but then please feel free to ask more questions. So Artem is wondering whether it's better to kind of think about predicting profitability rather than return rate. So kind of given that the 2 are correlated, but there are errors in that, can we think about different kind of prediction exercise.
So profitability, thanks, hey Adam. So the profitability has sort of a few other constructs in there, right? So it's got demand, it's got costs, right? So some of the items are just costlier to the firm. So again, I think if I were working for this retailer and trying to improve their bottom lines, probably you're right, that might be, or some combination of those two would be what we do. But we were academics and we were interested in what was driving return rates. So we sort of thought this would be the more interesting DB.
Well, and I would actually sort of say that even if you did have that goal, it may be that you want to factorize this problem in the way that you have, right? So even my suggestion was, I think my comment was related to Artem's point, would still be that you might want to use this model of return conditional on purchase, because that's a nuisance parameter that could be useful, even if that used.
Right. So if an item is unprofitable for you for various reasons, if it's unprofitable because it's getting returned so much, sort of the policy implications are a little bit different than if it's unprofitable for other reasons. Right?
It kind of goes back to the loss function story. I think it's an interesting point that you care about losses in some places more than others based on profitability, which I think would make sense, even from the academic point of view. I think there is a paper by Aurélie Lemons and Sunil Gupta in a more churn perspective, kind of making the same point, meaning as you estimate a churn model, should you weight more on high CLV people than equally as we do with the statistical model? I think it's kind of a similar point here, which I think
I agree. And I think there's a lot more work to be done on this return behavior. I think, again, it wasn't studied because it wasn't relevant, because in the offline channel, the return rates are so small that it's just not worth it. There's so much more money you can make by adjusting pricing or promotions or other things. But now I think it's something that we really have to worry about. So I think there are a lot of optimization papers to be written, or product design or pricing.
Hi, Daria. So I had first of all, I enjoyed your research. I'm new to deep learning, but from what I know about CNNs, I was curious if you've done sort of a deeper dive into comparing different types of models that you've used for extracting the data from the image themselves. So for instance, would you have any intuition about which types of CNN, like ResNets are known for being more high speed, they can skip forward in the network. So do you have any kind of intuition about which deep learning networks are doing a better job and on what type of images?
Yes.
I would love to know.
So, yes, totally. Thank you. So, hi. So we were initially using the VGG network, and then a reviewer recommended that we try the ResNet, and that did work a little bit better. Something we noticed early on, and that was just something that we kind of observed. I don't know if Marat is here, he can comment, which I thought was very interesting, but then, we sort of got away from that or sidetracked, which is something we noted, is that actually, if you take one of the earlier layers, that seems to do better. So we didn't train the network, we just took the last layer of a pre-trained network. And actually, if you take one of the earlier layers, that seems to be better. And you get sort of this inverted view if you look at sort of the very early layers are too abstract, but the very late layers, the last layer seems to be a little bit too concrete. So if you actually go a few layers back, that seems to do better, which I thought was very interesting. And again, maybe to be pursued in another paper.
That's very interesting you say that, because the more you go deeper into the network, the more it's able to identify the image better, gets more specific. So there might be some kind of over tuning going on.
Well, it's just that the features that are identified in these networks are optimized for the ImageNet data set, right? Not for this one. And so here you actually seem to do better. And again, that needs to be tested a lot more before we can say it with confidence. But if that's the case, I think that's a very interesting avenue. Yeah.
Okay.
But these were the ResNet, and we did try a few, and the ResNet was the best here. Yeah.
Daria, I had a quick question.
Hey, DK.
Hey. Yeah, I enjoyed the talk. I think you mentioned a couple slides ago the discrepancy between return rate between offline and online. Have you tried running that as the Y variable? Because that may be, yeah. And then
as the Y. I thought you meant as one of the X's.
No, as the Y variable, because that would try to figure out what is the distinct features, or can deep learning figure out what factors, you know, without being interpretable, even just predicts what might be different between offline and online, and then maybe that could jumpstart some other theory-driven investigation of what factors might be, you know, might be causing, or first correlated and then causing later more returns in the online, right? The factors.
My intuition is that they would be highly correlated. So the ones, and again, I'm sort of, as you can see, I'm kind of attached to this theory that these two constructs are linked: the online and offline discrepancy and the return rate. It's a little bit more complicated, of course, but my intuition is that they would be correlated. I'm not sure. We haven't tried it. What we did do was include the online and offline discrepancy as one of the X's. So if you want, right, one of the predictors. And that helps. Again, it helps a little bit, not as, you know, the deep learning actually, since the deep learning captures already a lot of those. But anyway, it's wishful thinking because you would have to be predicting return rate after you've observed demand, which is too late.
But I think maybe DK's question makes sense in the context of if the policy decision that you're contemplating is removing it from the online store while leaving it in the in-person store, maybe that's part of why it would be relevant to think of as actually your predictive task of predicting differences in return rates between the two settings. But again,
did you just differences in return rates or differences in the demand, in the sales? In the sales, I thought, no? That was what I was answering.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you could run different Y variable, right? That's offset by sales volume as well as just the difference. I mean, I think it would be interesting to figure out if what would be, I mean, it may pick up random things like that's not available in the images. I mean, you know, it could be that texture, you know, fit in, you know, things that are not in the images, but if there are something like that, it might be interesting.
Right. So there's something, yes, right. So if you wanted to figure out the optimal assortments for the two channels, and again, that's a really difficult problem, especially if you want to have two channels that interact, like in the showrooming way, right? That people can go and try stuff on and then order it online. Assortment optimization is already anti-hard, right? And if you want to solve it for the two, we've actually got a paper on that with, you know, with the conjoint data. You would definitely need, but not just the discrepancy, then you would need to have an estimate, a forecast of your online demand, your offline demand, and your return rates, right? You would need all four of those things. Yes. So, and of course, there are all these additional things that drive demand independently of the return rate.
I think we have one more question from Wenjie, and he's on the panel list.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much, Daria. And I really like your research and really opened my mind. So I have one question and one comment. So my question is more about clarification. So I'm just wondering about the company you are looking at. Is it like just they have one brand or they have multiple brands? Because what I was wondering is like Gap, like the company, they have 3 brands. One is for high end, one is for middle, one is for low. And then maybe your model works for low end brand like Old Navy, but may not work for like Banana Republic. That's what I was wondering.
So interestingly, I think, I don't know, Siham, are you here? I think they do actually have 3 brands or 2 brands. They have, yes, so they have this one, which is a little bit more for older women, more for work. And then they have like a teenage brand. And I agree with you. I mean, I think that this would definitely have to be reframed for every, you know, every company, because some, you know, because the segments are different. What the company is good at is different. For example, if you have a super high quality brand, then I think, you know, so we saw that the solids are getting returned more than the ones with the patterns. Because, you know, if you've got kind of mediocre quality and it's just a solid, then you return it because there's really nothing special about it. But you know, if you bought it because it has some interesting text on it, then even if the quality is not great, you keep it. But of course, that's going to be absolutely specific to every retailer, and you would need to retrain it.
So if I may jump in here, so the brand we are using, it's only one brand. So the retailer has like other sub brands, but all the items we are using here.
Data is the Banana Republic version, right?
Exactly, yes.
If you want that analogy, this is the Banana Republic version. So it's female only and more professional if you want.
I see. And also another thing is I kind of following DK's comment. I'm looking from the strategic of the company's point of view. I was thinking maybe the company's strategy somehow maybe affect the rate of returning. Really depend. So for example, what I'm thinking is like Zara, maybe they are encouraging people to buy a lot and then they throw away a lot, and then maybe I guess brands like that they may have a high return rate, but for other brands like Unique, they are kind of like stable in their brand style taste, and people very familiar with what they are. They are kind of coherent with their experience online or offline, so maybe they are less likely to prone to return. So that's what I was thinking.
So basically, like that's their intention, right? Like kind of opportunistic, if you want, right? So get people to buy a lot, and something will stick if you want. Good question. I mean, I agree. Both are kind of valid strategies as far as the firm goes, but hopefully that it's not crossing over into losing money, right? But again, so I think, as I said, that's why sort of this assortment, these decisions are more complicated than I want to sort of tread carefully here. But the consumer behavior aspect of it is sort of, and even if you are playing that strategy, you sort of still need to be able to predict what it's going to be, right? Especially if it's high. In fact, I think if your strategy is to have high return rates, it's all the more important that you're able to forecast what they are, right? Because if you're counting on 3% return rates, 4% return, 7% return rates, you know, so some will get returned. But if you're looking at these really high ones, I think it's important. Yes, and as there are other levers as well. Like again, you change the return policy a little bit. This is gonna change. So I mentioned earlier. So here, a lot of the apparel retailers do so because the shipping costs are high, they will do delivery by courier. And the courier waits here for 15 minutes for you to try things on. If you don't like it, whatever you don't like, you just give it back to the courier and they take it back. So you see, you know, so basically people start treating it as a decision to search and not really a decision to purchase, which might be why they're sort of online. You see this bias towards these more ambitious, entertaining items.
Are there any more questions?
Oh, actually, sorry, I just come up with another question I was about to ask quite a while ago. So I noticed that what you're looking at is about the textures, about the clothes. And I was wondering if I can apply your model to electronics, because I mean, from my cultural background from China, a lot of people buy electronics online. I was wondering if you can also use the picture to predict whether they will be more likely to be returned.
Question. So do you know, let's look back at the first slide. So our electronics are also quite high right here. So it's the second highest one in the thing. Good question. Why do you think people return electronics? I mean, like, what's the reason for returning? So if it's something where people sort of, I think what happens in apparel is that they want, and when they get it, and again, this is speculative, that they just realize, I don't need this, right? Do you think that, like, what is your intuition? Like, what drives return rates in electronics?
I think from my cultural background, especially in China, maybe people, they just think that the electronics doesn't like fit their hands, fit their feeling. For example, like I buy a keyboard from online, and then I assume that it will be like really easy for me to play with, play video game with it, but end up not playing it well. So that's what I'm thinking about. Another reason, maybe they just buy a fake product. Maybe fake product, yes.
Oh, so they buy it and decide I'll return the original and buy the.
No,
so
no. Sorry, what I mean is like maybe they thought like they look solid, look genuine, but end up they feel like, oh, they feel like it's a fake product, so they just return it.
So if
maybe
it's a matter of quality, oh, sorry, so I think if it's a vertical thing, not a horizontal thing, right? Where I don't like there's red and there's blue. But if it's a vertical thing where the quality is not good, then I would think that the reviews might be a better proxy. So basically, I think it's a matter of like where the additional information comes from. So, and it could be that once you incorporate reviews, that also in electronics, it's not so key to make this decision pre-launch because you don't have the seasonality problem, right? So in apparel, because the seasons are short, you can't really observe it. But with electronics, I would think that, so you can sort of test, you have more opportunity to test it out. And you don't have this very frequent turnover of products of the new collections coming. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so any more?
I think Nathan had a question too.
Yeah, go for it. I'm gonna go to my summary slide.
Oh, is that me?
Hey, Nathan.
Hey, how's it going? Can you hear me?
Oh, this Nathan. Nice to see you.
Yeah, I was asking if you looked at, because the data's at the transaction level, right? So if you include transaction level features, maybe you could interact those with image features, see who should be encouraged to buy and who shouldn't be encouraged to buy.
Interact those with image features. I like that. Right. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier that we did a whole bunch of sort of summary correlational statistics, but the transaction features are correlated, and even like things like time of day, day of the week. They're correlated. We were motivated by the pre-launch decisions, so we didn't. And we don't have the individual customer level, the individual customer data. So because we don't have a loyalty program, so we can't see what this guy or girl, bought in the past. So we can't do like a personalized recommendation kind of thing yet. But I think it's certainly be done, right? So with the right data, I'm sure that the image features are definitely correlated with personal preferences, and it could be.
Right. But even just at the basket level, I mean, people usually buy more than one item, and a lot of the questions were about like, well, people buying a bunch of stuff with the intention of returning some of it. If you can look at that transaction level profitability somehow and say, these are high return items, but they're good risks for us to take as a company to put them out there because they get people who keep something.
Buy items, I think. Right, so this is getting into this kind of like whether it's indeed a loss leader thing, right? So you put the pink dress there, it draws people in, but they buy the black t-shirt and okay, we lose money on the black dress. Yeah,
if you have the cost data, you should be able to tell if something's a loss leader or not. In that.
Right. So, but the question is again, can we tell pre-launch? So can we use the product image to tell pre-launch whether they're going to be returned so much that they're unprofitable?
Well, and just to follow up on that, I think that is one of the tensions in how you set up the contribution of the paper right now, is that some part of it you're arguing this is about pre-launch decision making, but you also want to avoid doing the whole assortment optimization problem, which would be the natural endpoint of that.
I want the pre-launch prediction.
Another part of your work is trying to understand what are the kind of consumer behavior and demand aspects that are driving returns. And so I think some of the questions around this may not be necessarily informing the pre-launch decision, but you're also not trying to push that to its full logical conclusion, and may help unpack why is it that this is happening?
That people do this, right? So why is it that people do this? And then I think that's sort of, again, and I think there's kind of a stream of research that can be built around this. So as I said, so sort of the cleanest thing that I have for you is this kind of this conjoint where it's just literally, and it's a much simpler product. It's a messenger bag. And people do weight things differently. So from that paper, there's one of the attributes of the messenger bag is the, it's the MIT favorite messenger bags, the Timbuktu, Olivia's favorite. So they have the padding, okay, the padding on the strap. So that attribute, the willingness to pay for it, is 3 times online what it is offline. Same people, same purchase occasion, exact same instructions, just looking at the item physically versus online. So sort of like for the consumer behavior, so that's kind of established that, you know, because online the attributes are listed attribute by attribute, and offline it's more holistic. And there's different costs to evaluate different attributes. Where, you know, offline they just want the pretty one, and if it's not the color they want, they don't even bother to open it to check if it has a laptop compartment. So that's sort of the cleanest test of the phenomenon from the consumer behavior.
But I think what I was just saying is part of what Nathan, you were suggesting was a matter of unpacking why that happens as well. That maybe like people are buying multiple items, and that's part of the phenomenon is that people are thinking, oh, I'm going to buy 3 dresses. At least 1 or 2 of these is going to end up being something I want to keep.
And we still make money.
Right. But also that's psychologically what's happening, and that would inform things like some of the promotion strategy, right. etc.
Yeah, and I mean, I actually think that these are fascinating, and I think, you know, I think we need new models for these kinds of things that we don't have, and I think that the search models are actually the way to go, right? So it's sort of but it's different from a search model because you then have to pay a cost to give it back. So there's a kind of fixed cost for purchasing and what you want to evaluate if you want, right? Search, and then you get to try it out. But then to give it back, you have to pay another hassle cost. So and I think this is actually fascinating that when I sort of started something like this with a student.
So I know you said you weren't really in the assortment or recommendation business here, but you could imagine if this were running on a active cart, it's like you could see what's the probability that something is going to get returned from this cart.
Right. And then
as it passes a certain point, it becomes profitable to just throw more and more high risk items at you that you're likely to return because you're going to return something anyway.
And the cost to us, all right. So we need to model that cost structure, right? Both to the customer and to the firm. And I think from the customer's perspective, something like that also happens, right? Like once you go past the point, I'm going to be returning some of this stuff, so let me just go crazy and buy 12 dresses. Yes. So let's write this paper.
You're not allowed to see stuff with sequins until your cart is over a certain size.
Minimum purchase threshold, right? Now that you're profitable. Secret room back here.
And related to this cart idea, right? Like there's so many people abandoning carts and then they're flooded with emails from companies about those items. You can imagine kind of instructing those companies on which emails to send out and which ones to not send out given the high or the low return rates of the
Interesting. So this cart wasn't profitable in the first place, right? Or like the guy put this together at midnight, it was going to be returned no matter what, right?
Don't email them, but if they were going to buy something.
Well, and actually try and empty it, right, by the time he comes back. So that, yeah, so that's another lever. Right, so what we have to do is like come up with what are the decision variables, what the firms can actually do, and then, so this is sort of just scratching the surface that I think it's very promising that we can forecast, right? So the information is there. It does seem to be a bias rather than lack of information. And yes, so let's all study returns time.
Very cool. Is there any other comments or questions for Daria? All right, then thank you very much, Daria. Thank you to our panelists and everyone.
Thank you so much. Oh my God, this was super fun. And it's very nice to see all of you, really.
Yeah, thanks a lot for sharing this. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Good night. Or, I mean, have a good day.